Facts First presents. 3 men ask waitress to settle bill in private. Then bartender sees check and realizes why. Working in the food service industry is not always easy. During a rush, the job can be very stressful. You often have multiple people waiting for a drink refill, wanting to place an order, or waiting for their checks, and all these people are doing it all at once. Also, not every customer is nice. You gotta deal with all customers with a smile, even those awful customers. What makes the job even more difficult is that the hourly wage for a server or a bartender, it's often extremely low. That means they have to rely on tips to make a living. And if a customer is not a good tipper, that can really affect your income. Despite all these issues, though, millions of people seem to like working in the food service industry, or at least end up there. Ashley Latella works as a bartender at the Sea Grape Cafe in Fairfield, Connecticut. It's her job to serve customers drinks, but she has to do more than that. She also has to provide service with a smile, along with some friendly conversation. That's kind of expected from a bartender. She also has to watch all of her customers to make sure nobody's drinking too much. And that can be a lot at times, but still, Ashley says that she loves her job. In December of 2013, Ashley was working her regular shift. The bar was really crowded that night because college students were home for the holidays enjoying their Christmas break. Because the bar was so crowded that night, Ashley's manager, Carlos Carmo, was pitching in to try and keep up with that thirsty crowd. That night, Carlos says that it was much busier than usual. He says having a conversation was almost impossible because the DJ was blasting the music and the college kids were trying to scream over the music. He says it was impossible to have a conversation with the customers. There were 3 guys at the bar that night, and they just didn't fit in with the college student clientele for some reason. According to Carlos, they were just 3 ordinary guys in their mid-40s, all in pretty good shape, good-looking men. He said that there was nothing really remarkable about them. They ordered some drinks, kept to themselves, and they didn't get rowdy like the other college kids in the bar were. It wasn't until the bill came that Carlos and Ashley discovered that there was something remarkable about these men. When the men were ready to leave, Ashley brought them their bill, and it was then they made an unusual request. They asked Ashley if they could pay her the money for their bill in private. Well, first, Ashley didn't know what to think of that request. Why did these men want to pay their bill in private? With reason, she was worried. Going off with 3 strange men who had been drinking, that could be dangerous for a young woman. She knew how people could be when they'd been drinking, and, well, she didn't want to go off in private alone with these guys. She was also worried that maybe they were going to complain about her service or the bill or their drinks. She decided to ask Carlos to go with her to speak to the men. If there was an issue with the service or their time at the bar, he would have to be the one to straighten things out anyway. Also, having somebody else with her made her feel more comfortable. She asked Carlos herself, and they took the 3 men into the kitchen to find out what was going on. When the men joined Ashley and Carlos in the kitchen, Carlos immediately asked if there was a problem. The men told him no, their service was excellent. The reason they asked to pay in private, it had nothing to do with poor service or any negative issues. They told Carlos and Ashley they wanted to pay their bill and tip all 4 of the bartenders who were on duty that night. Carlos thought that was a very generous gesture. They weren't responsible for tipping anyone but their own bartender, so he thought it was great they wanted to tip everybody. It wasn't until they saw the receipt that they were really surprised, though. When the men handed Carlos the receipt, he was shocked. The total cost of the bill was $112, and Carlos looked and saw that they had left a $500 tip. Just as he and Ashley were talking about how great these men were, Carlos looked at the receipt again. When he looked again, he realized that the tip the men left wasn't $500. It was $5,000. Carlos was thrilled, and Ashley burst into tears. She was so happy and thankful for the generosity. In her 3 years as a bartender, this was by far the biggest tip she had ever received. She gave the 3 men a huge hug for their kind gesture. Both Ashley and Carlos, they wanted to know who these men were. Tips this large are not common, especially in their little town in Connecticut. Both Carlos and Ashley decided they just had to know, so they asked the men who they were. The 3 men asked the waitress to settle the bill in private, and the bartender saw the check and realized why. Turned out that this was not the first time the men had left a massive tip for their servers. It was something they did quite often. They belonged to a group called Tips for Jesus. According to their Instagram page, it's their mission to do the Lord's work, one tip at a time. Turned out the employees at the Sea Grape Cafe, they weren't the only people to receive generous tips that month. That month, they tipped $11,500 to 3 separate restaurants around Manhattan. They were more on a mission during this month because it was the holiday season. They knew something like this could brighten up a person's holidays. Tips for Jesus didn't just help people in the New York area either. They actually traveled the country, giving huge tips to servers. They tipped one bartender $1,000 on an $85 bill. At a larger establishment, they left a $10,000 tip. They travel all around the country, giving gifts to bartenders who work so hard. They believe these people work such a hard day after day, serving others, trying to make them happy, they deserve to get something back. Carlos, Ashley, and the other 2 bartenders who were working that night, they decided they would use some of that money to give back. They wanted to pay it forward, so the next morning they went to a local toy store. And during the day, Ashley worked at a real estate office. She'd been trying to collect toys for a charity called Al's Angels. They collect toys during the holidays and donate them to children in need. Since Ashley had been trying to collect toys at her office, they all decided that they'd use some of the money to buy toys to donate. Carlos says the men's generosity was amazing, and he believes that his good karma is what brought them to the bar in the first place. He says that when he and his girlfriend eat out, he makes sure to leave an overly generous tip. He thinks that this was karma's way of paying him back, so he'd pay karma back by donating the toys. The 4 employees, they didn't use all the money to buy the toys, but they were able to donate quite a bit. Ashley says that she was able to give her family and friends great holiday gifts that year. Ashley, Carlos, and the rest of the staff, they were lucky that these men and most of their customers were nice. There are some servers, like Melina Salazar. She was forced to deal with demanding customers who are regulars at the establishment where she works. Melina works as a server at Luby's in Texas. She's been working at Luby's for years. Every day, 7 years straight, a man named Walter Buck Swords would eat there. He was an 89-year-old World War II veteran, and he had a reputation at Luby's. Not a good one. Buck was known at Luby's as being short-tempered, cranky, demanding, and extremely impatient. He'd often treat the hospital staff that ate there poorly. But Melina didn't let that get to him. Despite the way that he treated the staff at the restaurant, Melina always took his order with a smile. Even if he was mean to her, she took his order every day for 7 years and made sure to serve it the way he liked it, piping hot. While it was Melina's job to take the man's order, she always wanted to go the extra mile. She made sure to smile when she took his order, always asked him how he was doing. He was the grumpiest customer, and her fellow co-workers wondered how she had so much patience for a mean old man like that. Melina says that she just wanted to make the guy happy, feel welcome, so she was sure to be kind to him every day. Melina was shocked one day when Buck didn't show up at the usual time. In fact, for days he didn't come in, and Melina started to worry about him. She knew that he was old, so she worried that maybe he'd gotten sick or even worse. To see if something terrible happened to him, Melina flipped through the newspaper while she waited for her shift to begin. When she saw his obituary, it broke her heart. Sure, he wasn't the nicest man in the world, but she did care about the guy, and she was sad that he would never visit the restaurant again. Melina was sad about Buck's passing, and she figured that he never really thought much of her when he left the restaurant. A few weeks after Buck died, though, Melina received word that completely changed her attitude. She found out that Buck's lawyers had been trying to reach her because he had left her something in his will. Melina couldn't believe it. Buck was never nice to her, but he must have noticed that she was kind to him. When she found out what he left for her, she couldn't believe it. Melina met with Buck's lawyers, and they told her that Buck had left her his car. She couldn't believe it. She thought that was the kindest gesture. She was shocked when the lawyers told her it wasn't just the car that Buck left her. He also left her $50,000. Melina was thrilled that Buck had left her his car and some money. She was even happier that this grumpy, angry man had noticed her caring nature. She never thought that he had noticed that she was kind. She never knew that she had made such a significant impact on his life. She didn't believe that he even knew her name. Her kindness toward him paid off in more ways than one. Generous things like this don't happen every day. Most servers and bartenders don't expect to go to work and get outrageously large tips, but, well, it does happen from time to time. Some people think that this way of generous tipping is a new trend, but it's not. People have been trying to make their bartenders or servers' day for years. It wasn't until the invention of social media and viral photos that we actually started to hear about these kinds of generous gestures. Even if you can't afford to tip your server triple the amount of the bill, you should still try to give them an extra buck or two. It won't break the bank, but it might just make your server's day. Being appreciated is a great feeling, and $1 or $2 more can actually go a long way. Do you work in the service industry? What's the best tip you ever received? Or what's the best tip you ever gave? Tell us in the comments, and subscribe for more.